Good evening. I am Margie Franker, Chair of the Coldwater Lake Association's Lake Environment Improvement Committee, and I will be facilitating tonight's webinar. Our presentation tonight should last about an hour, and then we'll follow up with questions. Thanks for joining us tonight. This webinar is the first in a series of webinars we hope to present to our Coldwater Lake Association community, thanks to our generous members and donors. I'm sure there's many of you out in the audience tonight, so thank you very much for your support. If you are not a member, please consider joining the association. You can do so by visiting our website at coldwaterlakeassociation.com. Your support helps protect water quality, preserve property values, and keep our lake healthy for future generations. Membership also connects you with fun, welcoming community. Our annual pancake breakfast, food truck Fridays, and fireworks celebrations are just a few of the events that bring neighbors together. Since this is a recorded version and we're not live, I don't need to go through all the housekeeping items, but I do want to point out that as we move through the presentation, you'll see QR codes on the screen. If you keep your phones handy, you can scan them to access the specific websites and resources we'll be referencing. We have three presentations on the agenda tonight. First, I'll provide an update on the committee's current work and the status of Coldwater Lake's water quality. Then we'll discuss how we can protect and improve that water quality. Our second presentation focuses on watersheds. A watershed works like a funnel. Everything that happens across the landscape, from fertilizer use to stormwater and erosion, eventually flows towards the lake. Watershed actions influence what enters the funnel, and then the riparian zone at the tip of that funnel, that determine what actually crosses the finish line. What shoreline owners do at that final point affects whether the lake receives clean, filtered water or excess nutrients and sediment. Both levels of action are essential to protecting lake health. We're pleased to have tonight two experts with us. Julia Kirkwood from the Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy, who will discuss watershed management and how it affects Coldwater's lake health, and Eric Elgin from Michigan State University Extension, who will share easy ways for lakefront owners to help keep the water clean and support healthy habitat. Progressive Companies AE has been monitoring water quality on the Marble Coldwater chain since 2016. They specialize in lake management and environmental consulting and work under contract with the Marble Coldwater Improvement Board, which includes the 4 township supervisors, Mike Hard, the Branch County Drain Commissioner, and Dan Whitney representing all of the lake residents. They measure key indicators of lake health, including Secchi depth to track water clarity. Phosphorus is what fuels algae growth. Chlorophyll A is a direct measure of the algae in the water column. And dissolved oxygen and temperature, which affect fish and overall ecosystem health. They also monitor for exotic aquatic plants, which crowd out our native plants and interfere with boating and swimming. The goal is to protect our native plants while eliminating these invasive species, because our native root system holds sediments in place and reduces erosion and provides for important habitat. After identifying invasive species, Progressive then arranges for both chemical and, in certain months, mechanical treatments to manage weeds across the chain. In late August 2025, our committee joined the Michigan Clean Water Corps Cooperative Lakes Monitoring Program to support and expand the work Progressive is already doing. With Terry Stewart and Jack Sanderson leading the effort, this volunteer monitoring will give us more frequent, consistent data and help us see seasonal changes that occasional professional visits might miss. The program also builds long-term standardized data we can compare to hundreds of other Michigan lakes. This is useful for spotting trends, applying for grants, and making better management decisions. We're also expanding the number of Secchi monitoring sites to help pinpoint where problems may be entering the lake. If we see unusual clarity in any area, we can follow up with additional testing, which might include total suspended solids and E. coli. Progressive provides an annual water quality summary for the entire chain, and those reports are available on the Coldwater Lake Association's website. So let's look at that current state of the lake using Progressive's data from 2016 through 2025. This graph shows the average trophic state index, or TSI, for the Marble Coldwater chain. A lake's trophic state reflects its overall health and how much algae and plant growth it can support. Along the x-axis, the lakes are listed from Marble down to Coldwater, with the years shown in the legend below. Along the y-axis, you see the TSI scale, which tops out at 60. There is a fourth category above 70 called hypereutrophic, but those lakes are generally not suitable for recreation. The background colors seen here, the green, white, and blue, show the trophic categories. Oligotrophic lakes have low nutrients, clear water, and low algae growth. Mesotrophic lakes have moderate nutrients and clarity, while eutrophic lakes have high nutrients, more algae, and poorer quality or poorer clarity. Lower TSI values mean better water quality. Higher values indicate more nutrients, more algae, and a greater risk of low oxygen and blooms. I also want to note, though, while this committee is focused on Coldwater Lake, we have been collaborating with the Marble Chain Improvement Association. I invited Dennis Smith, that association's president, to share our meeting information with his membership. So I'd like to welcome our neighbors from the north who are joining us this evening. It is important to remember that Coldwater Lake is sewered, which matters when interpreting these results. The data clearly shows the water quality benefits of sewer systems compared to the risks of the septic tanks, especially since discussions around sewering the full chain are moving forward. Using that same progressive data, we're able to look at the trend of the eutrophication of Coldwater Lake. A lake's ecosystem is complex, and many factors influence its trophic state. Water temperature, weather patterns, and lake levels can shift conditions from day to day. In 2025, Coldwater Lake's water quality actually improved. Diving deeper into that data, the improvement was due to lower chlorophyll levels. Regardless of how we got there, Coldwater has returned to an oligotrophic state, and our goal is to maintain it. However, while the TSI index improved in 2025, Secchi depth continues to decrease, and the long-term TSI trend remains concerning. That's this orange line that's showing us that it is trending towards a mesotrophic state. And why should we care about trophic state and water clarity? Eutrophication hinders all types of recreational activities like swimming, boating, fishing, and paddling. Eutrophication causes issues such as harmful algae blooms that can be toxic and reduce oxygen levels, which can kill fish. It also impacts property values. Numerous studies show that as a lake becomes more eutrophic, surrounding property values decline, while healthy, clear lakes hold or retain their value. Likewise, either hold or gain their value, I should say. Likewise, water clarity significantly affects property values. Lakes naturally age over thousands, even millions of years, as nutrients and sediment closely build up. That gradual increase in plants and algae is normal, but human activity can greatly accelerate the process. Poorly managed agricultural runoff, careless boating, and manicured lawns introduce excess nutrients that speed up eutrophication. I asked Julia and Eric to be here tonight because they are true watershed experts. I am not. Everything I know about watersheds I have learned from them or from reading other watershed management plans from other lakes, which they have shared with me. Every watershed management plan ends with a strategy for improving lake health and a cost estimate to implement those strategies. What I can tell you is, for lakes already dealing with significant problems, those costs can be astronomical. But lakes that stay proactive and with their planning and with their implementations are far more manageable. That's why it's so important for us to watch this trend line closely and take action now before the situation becomes much harder and much more expensive to fix. So what are we going to do about it? Well, we formed this committee. Here is our first QR code. Feel free to scan it and view the team's bios. I would be remiss if I didn't recognize the team behind this work. Tom Manning, president of the Coldwater Lake Association, along with the CLA board members, serve as our steering committee. They formally commissioned this team on August 12th of this year, and we are grateful for their leadership and their foresight in responding to concerns shared by so many association members. I also want to acknowledge my husband, Arnie. None of this would be possible without him. We share a deep commitment to clean, healthy lakes. And when I take on a project like this, he is always beside me, giving me his full support and energy. Each member of this team contributes their own strengths and areas of focus, from outreach and education, to fundraising, to merchandising, grant writing, research, monitoring, and watershed management planning. Their combined skills have fueled remarkable progress in just 3 months, and I'm incredibly proud of what we have already accomplished together. A heartfelt thank you to Sarah Roper, Kirsten Feltz, Michael Groth, Terry Stewart, Jack Sanderson, Ginger McMillan, and Dave and Jill Slider. Their bios are available on the Coldwater Lake Association website. If you are not scanning QR codes tonight, please visit that website in the future and get to know these great neighbors. If you see them on the water or around the neighborhood, please take a moment to thank them for their dedication. In addition to our monitoring efforts, we've expanded our focus on education and awareness. Tonight marks our first webinar, and we encourage everyone to explore the new water quality page on coldwaterlakeassociation.com. We've also launched Water Quality Wednesdays. These are posts on the Coldwater Lake Association Facebook page, led by Kirsten Feltz. In the slides ahead, I'll discuss topics such as geese management, our watershed management plan, the All Eyes on the Water campaign, and ongoing collaboration efforts. Fundraising and merchandising are also play a key role in raising awareness. Under the leadership of Sarah Roper, we are preparing for spring native plant sale with pre-order sales expected to open in February. And we are developing new Keep Cold Water swag items, including decals, flags, and koozies, to help promote and support our mission. So stay tuned to those upcoming sales items. Another QR code takes you to All Eyes on the Water, which encourages everyone who uses the lake. Shoreline residents, boaters, anglers, or paddlers. We're asking you to report anything that looks unusual: strange algae, new plant clusters, or unknown mussels, or odd foam. These problems often start small, but catching them early makes them much easier to fix. It's like a neighborhood watch for the lake. When many people pay attention, we can protect water quality, property values, and the activities we all enjoy. If something looks off, take a picture and report it right away using the forms on our website. Your quick action could prevent a small issue from becoming a big problem. Many of you already signed our petition to reduce the goose population, and thank you. If you haven't, the QR code links you to that petition. In spring, our volunteers plan to collect and destroy goose eggs to control overpopulation. That action requires resolutions from Kinderhook and Ovid townships, so we're collecting signatures in support. But let me emphasize, this decision has not been taken lightly. Although we've gathered over 300 signatures, the issue remains controversial. Unfortunately, it has become a necessary measure to protect the health and safety of our families and community. We truly respect the views of both hunters who'd prefer to lift hunting restrictions and animal advocates who oppose this on ethical grounds. We do understand both sides. The problem is manicured lawns, minimal native vegetation, and open shorelines create ideal year-round habitat. This is like putting a welcome mat out for the geese. Excessive goose droppings are hurting water quality. They're fueling algae growth that can become toxic and spreading parasites that can make children seriously ill. For these reasons, egg destruction has become a difficult, necessary step to protect our community. Our goal is to eliminate the need for this measure in the long term. The long-term solution is not continual egg destruction, it is habitat change. Eric will be discussing best practices for riparian owners, an essential part of protecting water quality. These practices also make our shorelines less desirable to geese, thus naturally reducing their presence in the area. Please give Eric your full attention and consideration during his presentation. I'd like to share one final initiative our subcommittee, Sarah Roper, Michael Groth, and I are working on, and that's developing a watershed management plan. This is basically a roadmap for protecting and improving long-term water quality. A key part of this plan is identifying pollution sources, which Julia will cover shortly. In our research, we found that neither Coldwater Lake nor the Marble Coldwater chain currently has an active watershed plan. While we've been focusing on cold water's potential contamination sources within the Coldwater watershed, we also learned that residents on the Marble chain are exploring renewed efforts to install sewer infrastructures across the entire chain. Both efforts are very complex and require expertise beyond what our volunteers can provide. To strengthen our work, our subcommittee has partnered with the Marble Chain Group to form the Marble Coldwater Partnership, allowing us to support each other and work with the professionals needed to guide these projects effectively. So the experts that we're working with include Michigan Clean Water Corp, Marble Coldwater Chain Improvement Board, Progressive Companies, Branch County Conservation District, St. Joseph River Basin Commission, Branch County Drain Commission, the Quincy, Algancy, Ovid, and Kinderhook Townships, Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy, Southwest Michigan Land Conservancy, and the Michigan DNR. And of course, Eric is with us from Michigan Clean Water Corp. And Julia from the Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy. Thank you. In just 3 months, we've accomplished a lot, but there's much more to do, and we need more help. If you'd like to get involved, you can scan the QR code to access the volunteer sign-up form. Here are a few initiatives we hope to launch, but they'll require more volunteers. Kids programs. Teaching children now builds lifelong habits and creates the next generation of lake stewards. Clean Boats, Clean Waters. This is a program that trains volunteers to inspect boats at launch sites and educate boaters to prevent the spread of aquatic invasive species. Score the Shore. These volunteers assess shoreline health to support restoration projects that reduce erosion, filter nutrients, and boost biodiversity. Michigan's Shoreline Steward Ambassadors. Well, with a short training course, these volunteers can help lakefront owners assess and improve their shorelines, essentially acting as shoreline consultants who provide guidance while supporting owners' wishes and protecting the lake at the same time. Many lake residents worry about using chemicals to treat aquatic weeds, often saying weeds are good for fish, and that is true for native plants. But if invasive weeds are not treated, they quickly form dense mats that crowd out native plants and actually harm fish habitat. Their spread also worsens water quality by recycling nutrients, fueling algae blooms, and lowering oxygen as they decay. Mechanical harvesting is used on the chain as a non-chemical option during certain months due to fish spawning, but it has its drawbacks too. It only cuts the tops of the plants, leaving the roots to regrow, especially with milfoil and curly leaf pondweed species. It also produces lots of fragments, and many invasive species spread by fragmentation, creating new infestations. Other methods like DASH, which is diver-assisted suction harvesting, and benthic barriers work well but are extremely labor-intensive and costly. One way to reduce costs is by training volunteer divers to help with installation and harvesting. If you're a certified diver and want to support lake health, please sign up using the QR code or visit the Coldwater Lake Association website and click on volunteer or join the committee. I am thrilled to have with us here tonight two leaders who bring tremendous expertise to our work on water quality improvement. Julia Kirkwood from the Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy, widely known as EAGLE. Julia has a gift for helping communities understand both the science and the solutions that keep our waters healthy. She has been instrumental in guiding our watershed partnership team. Alongside her is Eric Elgin from Michigan State University Extension, a trusted educator in lake management and shoreline protection. Eric has helped our committee understand best management practices that improve habitat, stabilize shorelines, and protect water quality. We're grateful to have both Julia and Eric here with us tonight to share their expertise with all of you. With that, I will turn the screen over to Julia.
Because the webinar recording was not captured as expected, we used the webinar transcript to recreate Julia Kirkwood's presentation. This recorded version has been re-recorded using AI voice software.
Okay, thank you, Margie. Okay, everyone, thank you. Looks like a great group tonight. Just another real quick note. Margie mentioned I work for EAGLE. I work in our Water Resources Division, and I've been working on watershed issues for over 25 years now. For the past 20-something years, I've worked with a lot of different communities on watershed plans and figuring out ways to protect both rivers and lakes, and what best practices make sense. Eric and I also head up the Michigan Natural Shoreline Partnership. We're the two key people in shoreline protection as well. So, with that, I'm going to start with the Watershed Program and what our program is. The program I work with is what we refer to as the Non-Point Source Pollution Program, also known as the Watershed Management Program. Our two main goals, when I think about elevator speech, are to restore and protect water bodies. From a restoration aspect, we focus on the number one priority: impaired water bodies. This comes to us from EPA under Section 319 of the Clean Water Act. It makes it critical for us to focus on these water bodies, and that's how our program is funded. But many years ago, our program said, look, we really want to focus on protecting high-quality waters as well. Michigan, particularly in Region 5 and across the nation, is leading the way in multiple areas. We still have a lot of work to do, but we're plugging along. I want to bring up these terms because this is what we focus on, and it's critical to the work we do. When we talk about impaired water bodies, we look at the designated uses, which ones are impaired, and why. These are the designated uses that water bodies are protected for. Not all designated uses apply to every water body. For example, not every water body will have a public water supply intake. Not every water body will have an industrial water supply. Navigation applies mostly to coastal areas where the Army Corps has oversight and allows ships to come in. The designated uses highlighted in yellow are the ones we focus on, the ones affected by non-point source pollution. So, when we talk about a watershed, we focus on protecting and restoring water bodies from a watershed approach. We look at the entire watershed and everything that drains into it. For a lake, it's not just what's at the lake. It's what's immediately around it and what's happening throughout the watershed. We must look at the whole picture. From a non-point source perspective, we look at all sources. Whatever runs off the land ends up in the lake, the rivers, or the storm drains. Once you start looking around, it's one of those things. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. What's challenging is that non-point source pollution is not regulated. It comes from many diffuse sources. In larger cities, some stormwater is regulated. Really large farms are regulated too, but that doesn't mean they aren't still contributing runoff. Some other things we think about include the volume of water. We consider the amount of water running off as a pollutant because in large rain events, it can cause what we call flashiness, huge amounts of water rushing into small creeks causing erosion. The little creek in the upper left is a stable stream. After a rain event, there isn't much erosion. But the two creeks in the other pictures show a lot of erosion happening for various reasons. In a natural system, forests, grasses, ground cover, rainfall infiltrates. Only about 10% runs off. But as development increases, impervious surface increases, causing more runoff, reducing groundwater recharge, and changing the system dramatically. These changes show up in stormwater runoff curves. For example, in an urban area, a 1-inch rain event produces rapid runoff that peaks quickly in storm drains, creating large scouring events in creeks. In agricultural areas, runoff starts slower and peaks later. In forested areas, runoff is slower and less erosive. Think about these things as you work on a watershed plan or investigate where problems are happening. Your lake's nutrient retention also depends on how the lake functions. If a lake has no outlet, nutrients stay there. If a lake was originally a wetland and was impounded to make it larger, it will hold nutrients and will still want to function like a wetland. An impounded river becomes a nutrient sink. Lakes with long retention times hold nutrients longer. Here are examples. A northern Michigan lake with a lot of natural land cover, Lake Lansing with mixed development, and Walnut Lake, heavily developed with impervious surfaces. Walnut Lake likely has nutrient and algae issues. Lake Lansing has some. The northern lake probably has none. Margie mentioned prevention is key. As development happens, you need to think about prevention. Low-impact development, ordinances, capturing runoff before it reaches the lake. A watershed plan is the process we use, gathering information, doing inventories, identifying problems, prioritizing them, and creating a framework for solutions. Margie mentioned the Marble Coldwater chain does not have a watershed plan. There was an old one from the 1990s under the former Clean Lakes program, but it's so outdated it's unusable. The Hodunk Messenger Plan, 2007, and Hog Creek Plan, 2005, are also very old. Watershed plans should be updated about every 10 years, so these need to be redone. Funding. When people ask about funding, the answer is yes, with a big caveat: very little. Our statewide annual funding is roughly $275,000. One plan can cost over $200,000. Sometimes we can fund 1 or 2 plans, maybe a third small component. That's for the entire state. So, you have to be creative. Some components can be funded from other sources. Some may rely on volunteers. For example, the Cooperative Lakes Monitoring Program and Score the Shore contribute important data and help fill data gaps. We have specific criteria in our handbook, which is easier to read than the EPA guide. It's a little outdated, but still very usable. If you want a watershed plan approved through EGLE, there's a process. That approval makes you eligible for future Section 319 implementation funding and looks good for other funding opportunities. Building partnerships is key. You already have a good start. From there, work with us to identify next steps and begin characterizing the watershed. Then you develop goals, solutions, an implementation plan with timelines and partners, an education, outreach component, and an evaluation process to measure progress. To give you a big picture look, this map is from the Midwest Glacial Lakes Partnership Conservation Planner tool. It shows watershed disturbance and shoreland disturbance. Shoreland disturbance is the 100 meters around the lake. Watershed disturbance is the rest. Both are in the red zone. Shoreland disturbance over about 10% starts showing impacts. Coldwater Lake still has decent water quality, likely because it has been on sewer so long. But nutrients are still coming in, so preventing future inputs is critical. Marble Lake's watershed disturbance is higher. Its shoreland disturbance is a bit lower. The next step is doing inventories, identifying erosion, sediment sources, stormwater inputs, road runoff, driveway runoff, E. coli, geese issues, remaining high-quality natural areas, wetlands, and so on. Here is wetland loss. All the red areas are wetland complexes that used to be there. When wetlands are removed, the water goes somewhere, into the lake, carrying sediment and nutrients. Your watershed is in the St. Joe River watershed, which has a Landscape Level 1 functional analysis. It assigns functions to every lost wetland complex, so if you have flooding downstream, you can often trace it back to where floodwater retention capacity was lost. This septic suitability map from the Hodunk Messenger chain shows that almost none of the soils are suitable for septic systems. That means septic systems in the watershed are high risk for contributing nutrients and E. coli. Septic systems aren't designed to treat nutrients, only bacteria. Older systems release more nutrients. High water saturates drain fields. Some older properties may have failing systems and not know it. Some may have no system at all. Historically, seasonal cottages had small buildings, large lots, no impervious surfaces, and small lawns. Now we have larger year-round homes, more wastewater going through septic systems, more runoff, and large lawns. Lawns attract geese. The best thing anyone can do is reduce lawn size, especially at the water's edge. Buffers work. I've seen them significantly reduce goose and swan populations in multiple areas, from "so disgusting you couldn't walk there" to "wow, where did the geese go?" Margie mentioned the Michigan Shoreland Stewards Program and the Ambassador Program. Not everyone can do everything, but everyone can do something. Every lake resident can take the Shoreland Stewards Survey. It's free, it's online, and it's short. If you need help, Margie can help, or we can get in contact. There are videos, a program guide, and more resources. Very few people in your region have taken it, so participation is important. You can take it anonymously, but registering gets you more information. At the end egg, you'll get general recommendations. Not every property can qualify for bronze, silver, or gold, especially small lots with seawalls and impervious surfaces. But every property can do something. The recommendations will help guide improvements. I think that's all I'm going to say right now. That's my cue to hand it over to Eric. He'll go into more detailed best management practices and recommendations you can get through the Shoreland Stewards Program.
Because the webinar recording was not captured as expected, we used the webinar transcript to recreate Eric L. Jin's presentation. This recorded version has been re-recorded using AI voice software.
All right, hello everybody. My name is Eric L. Jin. I'm an aquatic ecologist with Michigan State University Extension, and I work on the conservation of our inland lakes statewide. And I'm the last speaker tonight, and I know I think it's the third installment of Ken Burns' Revolutionary War on PBS. I don't know if people are, that's a huge thing right now. So I won't keep you from that starting soon. As Julia mentioned, she narrowed it down from her watershed perspective broadly to now right around the water's edge, and that's where we're going to focus for the rest of the evening. And so these shorelands, there's the shoreline where the water meets the land, and then the land above, the upland. And it varies, but you could say up to 100 meters, 300 feet. But these shorelands are a transition between land and water and are essential for a lake's functioning habitat and ecosystem as a whole, including water quality. And when we look at all of those connections, plants are foundational in this zone. Plants stabilize the slopes. Plants stabilize and anchor the sediments on the shoreline or in the water itself. As water moves through the landscape, plants slow the water movement and allow for absorption into the soil. They absorb nutrients and hold them through time. And critical habitat that we see, I'm not going to talk too much about it tonight, but part of what drives us to be living on our lakes and on our waters is a whole lot of things. It's not just the water itself. It might be the frogs singing in the springtime. Well, they need vegetation and wetland shorelines to persist. It might be that loons stop over. Well, you need good water quality and possibly wetland habitat, especially if they are nesting there. Belted kingfishers, those are shoreline birds, require overhanging trees, lots of dead branches too, so that they can perch out over the water's edge. So plants are foundational to all of those things. And as Julia mentioned, our residential development has changed a lot of vegetation and increased impervious surfaces, our driveways, our roofs, and so on. We've lost a lot of our trees, a lot of our shrubs, a lot of our native flowers and grasses. And with that, we've lost habitat, we've increased runoff. And remember, runoff can pick up pollutants, nutrients, salts, oils, brake dust, pathogens, all sorts of things. And without vegetation, we see all of these pollutants increasing in our lakes. So the rest of this presentation is, what can we do as a community and as individual landowners around our lakes? I'm going to briefly talk about protect what we have. I'll talk mostly about mitigating our impacts. We don't have to remove ourselves. We love living on the water, and there are things we can do to help mitigate the impacts we have. So let's first look at protecting. If you have it, keep it. Protect the vegetation you have. Here's a nice image showing mature trees on a shoreland property. It's great to keep those mature trees as much as possible. If you're just considering, well, that tree is blocking a view, instead of cutting down that mature tree, consider trimming it up. It takes a very long time to have a mature tree. Even if you replant, you might not be here when that tree finally gets 2.5 feet in diameter. So keep the trees and vegetation you have. I also circled some of the aquatic plants. You can still have full access. This person has a dock, access points into the water, but maintaining native aquatic vegetation is important. Aquatic plants do a tremendous amount, not just for habitat for fish, birds, wildlife like frogs, but also holding sediment, absorbing nutrients, and outcompeting less favorable plants. On a broader scale, and this gets at what Julia was saying, is there a larger chunk of natural shoreline around the lake? I was taking a peek, just cruising around, and noticed there is a spot on the lake with quite a bit of natural shoreline left. I don't know if those landowners are here, but that's part of doing the survey Julia mentioned, getting stock of what you have and seeing if it can be protected into the future or enhanced further. Because that area might be a great spawning area for fish due to less disturbance. Protecting that one area can help fisheries across the lake. Now, mitigating our impacts of residential development. There are many practices, and I'm going to move through them fairly quickly to show the breadth of what can be done. Largely, we're trying to slow runoff, catch runoff, reduce runoff. We're trying to reduce and slow erosion at the shoreline or on slopes. We're trying to reduce nutrient inputs. For example, fertilizer applied around the lake has a high potential of getting into the water. Fertilizer helps grass grow, but it also fuels algal growth. We want to reduce inputs on the land so they don't get into the water. Many of these practices also add habitat and bring a fuller experience to the lake. One simple solution is landscaping with nature. This image is more of a cottage garden approach with a lot of vegetation. Maybe not realistic for everyone, but there are many options. The goal is balance, an integrated habitat where we are part of it. In this illustration, the property has a view, a lawn, privacy, and full access for recreation or swimming, but blends landscaping options that benefit the lake as well. Native plants at the shoreline create a stable shoreline, catch nutrients, add habitat, enhance aesthetics, and improve habitat. We're not trying to eliminate ourselves. We're trying to create balance. The native plant world talks a lot about plant choices, and this sums it up. Classically, we choose plants for decorative value, pretty focal points, anchors in the landscape, screens for privacy. What we're suggesting is a more balanced approach. We still want beauty in screens, but we want plants to be functional too. Beautiful plants that slow runoff, pretty screens that support food webs. That's the idea. One simple option, which many of you might already have, is to consider a 1950s lawn. Back then, lawns were not monocultures. They had mixed grasses, white clover, violets. There wasn't much fertilizing or watering, no broad-spectrum herbicides because that diversity was part of the aesthetic. If you don't mind a more diverse lawn, this reduces inputs. No nitrogen fertilizer, which easily enters water bodies and can cause algal blooms. What if you have erosion issues near your shoreline or on a steep bank? You can plant native plants that add beauty, support butterflies, and hold the bank. Native plants have deep or dense roots that hold the shoreline. Here's another example. This property kept its lawn, but because they live on a steep slope, they put native plants at the shoreline edge. These capture runoff, uptake nutrients, slow erosion, create beauty. It can look many different ways. Here's a more park-like aesthetic with a path. Familiar plants like daisies mixed with Joe Pye weed. If you're worried about views, here's an example showing the maintained view, maybe even enhanced because of landscaping. This invites more wildlife, butterflies, birds, turtles. You can integrate it with the landscape. You can still have a beach, just not across the entire property. You might not want a buffer across your whole frontage, so maybe a smaller one. But don't mow to the water's edge. That creates beautiful views, access and erosion control while capturing runoff and providing habitat. If you say, Eric, I already have a seawall and I'm not going to remove it. Removing seawalls is a tremendous amount of work. If you have a seawall, that doesn't eliminate you from doing practices that help the lake. You can add a shoreline garden above the seawall. You can reduce impervious surfaces. Instead of a solid sidewalk, use pavers or stones with soil gaps so rain can be absorbed. There's also low-sloping rock. If your seawall isn't too tall, recommended by the state of Michigan. The correctly sized rock buffers waves so they dissipate instead of crashing into the lake bottom. Aquatic plants are essential, the underwater forest of our lakes. Not all are weeds. Many are great native species that enhance the environment. They help shorelines by absorbing wave energy, so by the time waves reach the shoreline, they're gentle laps with lower erosive potential. A few more. Rain gardens moving up into the upland part of the shoreland. A rain garden is simply a garden that captures runoff in a low spot or strategic location where runoff from a driveway or roof flows. Downspouts can go into them. These perennial gardens take that first flush of water so it doesn't go into storm drains or directly into the lake. It gets absorbed and processed instead. Rain gardens aren't just for individual properties. Communities can do curb cutouts. Runoff from driveways goes into a garden instead of a storm drain that leads to untreated discharge into the lake. A rain garden is not a pond. It's designed to lose water quickly so it doesn't breed mosquitoes. There is maintenance. Sediment sometimes needs to be removed. They don't have to be expensive unless they're huge or part of a big infrastructure project. We can also reduce impervious surfaces and add beauty, using permeable pavement instead of solid concrete or asphalt. Water can be absorbed while still giving you a nice place to park or drive. Planting trees. Trees do a tremendous amount of good for water quality and habitat. They're beautiful, fun to plant with family, and wonderful for dedications. Why not plant a tree next to the shoreline on Mother's Day? Other ways to capture water. Instead of water running off your lawn collecting pollutants, you can capture it in rain barrels and use it for watering. If a rain garden isn't practical, you can create rock infiltration pits. Holes in the ground with fabric and stone that fill with runoff and slowly release it into the soil. French drains are similar. If you have sloping pavement, you can capture runoff before it shoots into the water and direct it into a rain garden or infiltration pit. You can go big. Eric, I hate mowing my lawn. What can I do? In Minnesota, the Lawns to Legumes program replaces lawn with native and traditional species. If you prefer a cottage garden aesthetic, that might be for you. It can look many different ways. Lawns are embedded in how we view beauty, but there are many ways to utilize yard space to improve water quality. So that's the end of my presentation. Together, individuals can create cumulative positive impacts on our lakes. That's what happens at the watershed scale too. Julia's right. There are many things we can do, and it can be overwhelming. You don't need to do all of them. But if we individually start adopting better practices, collectively, we can make a difference. Thank you all very much. Margie, I don't know. Do we open it for questions?
Because the webinar recording was not captured as expected, we used the webinar transcript to recreate the question and answer session. This version has been re-recorded using AI voice software. Before fielding questions, Margie asked if there were any other comments from Julia or Eric, and Julia responded.
Eric and I want to share information about our upcoming Introduction to Lakes, which is a 6-week online course specially designed for lake users, lakefront property owners, and lake managers. Registration is open for MSU Extension's 6-week online class starting in January. Eric and I are both instructors. There are 6 modules, mostly videos, but also 3 live chats and a question and answer forum that we oversee. It's a really good course.
Then the presenters fielded questions from the chat.
I see a question about planting trees along the shorelines. They are asking about the leaves or cottonwood getting into the water and wondering if that causes increased nutrients. Those are natural sources and not a problem. Dumping leaves into the lake is a problem because it provides an overabundance of nutrients, but natural leaf fall is normal. Historically, lakes had large amounts of woody material along the shoreline, which is natural and beneficial. Most of that has disappeared around developed lakes, which harms lake health. Also, those naturally fallen leaves create habitat for macroinvertebrates, fish food, and places for small critters to hide. They provide food for frogs, turtles, and birds. We want trees along our shorelines because their roots help stabilize the soil, which reduces erosion and keeps sediment from washing into the lake. Trees also act as a natural filter, capturing nutrients and runoff before they reach the water, which improves water quality and helps prevent algae blooms. In addition, shoreline trees provide shade, habitat, and cooling for fish and wildlife. Overall, they create a healthier, more stable shoreline and a cleaner, more resilient lake. I saw a message in the chat about farm runoff incidents. EPA does not handle regulatory actions. I don't know if the farm issue was reported to Eagle or not. If it was reported, Eagle would follow up, and that would come through the Kalamazoo District Office. If you want to know what happened or what the process is, Eagle staff would have that information. There's a compliance process depending on what occurred. You can follow up with the Eagle staff person assigned. Margie, I think you can ask Matt Hanauer who the specific contact is. There may be several agricultural compliance staff in the Kalamazoo office.
Thanks, Julia. I will. I don't know for sure, but I heard it was reported to Eagle and is being addressed. I don't have an update. I believe the farm is in Algon C Township, and it was brought up at a township meeting as well. That might be a good place to look for updates. And just to respond to the comment that lawns and yard sizes around Coldwater Lake aren't affecting water clarity, unfortunately, the data shows otherwise. Our Secchi depth has been dropping at an alarming rate, and that's exactly why the Keep Coldwater Clear initiative exists. We want to stop that decline and protect the clarity of the lake. As Julia always says, not everyone can do everything, but everyone can do something. It really comes down to cumulative impacts. When each of us takes small actions, those efforts add up. And together, they create real, lasting change. Okay. In response to those asking for more information on the marble chain sewers, the initiative to revisit a sewer infrastructure on the rest of the chain is being led by the Algan Sea Supervisor, Craig Fichtelberg. The committee is just forming, and they are actually a subcommittee of the Marble Coldwater Partnership, who will be meeting next on December 11th. Here is another question. Do you have any resources for landscape designers, or can the state help with that?
Those are a little harder to find in this area. On the Michigan Natural Shoreline Partnership website, there's a map of native plant nurseries. A couple are in Indiana, and many have knowledgeable staff. Also, the Wildflower Association is a good resource. The Wildflower Association of Michigan also has information on native plant landscapers. I know a couple in the Kalamazoo area. Creating a list of native plant designers is on my to-do list. We also have contractor training for shoreline work. Many of those contractors are landscapers who incorporate native plants. Some are engineers expanding into shoreline projects. There are a lot of resources out there. Our plant list on the Shoreline Partnership website is a good starting point. It organizes plants by appropriate zones. It's not exhaustive, but it's a great start.
And there's the link right there. That's the native plant list.
Thanks, Julia and Eric. Someone also asked if we can put these links on our website. Yes, I'll get them posted when I upload the recording. Some are already there, but I'll make sure we have everything in one spot on our website under the webinar summary. Any other questions?
Here's one. Is Eagle working with Coldwater State Park to remove invasive plants with the $150,000 donation?
Could you read it again?
The question is whether Eagle is working with Coldwater State Park to remove invasive plants using a $150,000 donation. I don't have any information on that. I also don't know who would have donated that amount.
Okay. I'll look into it and see if we can get more information. Maybe we can follow up in an email blast.
I think DNR would be the agency to talk with if the donation went to the park.
Someone responded in the chat that it was given by a solar company for goodwill. I saw another question about planting sawgrass. I'm not sure which species they meant, but generally no. You want true native species. They're adapted and provide the best habitat. There are many grasses, sedges, and rushes you can use, depending on height and purpose, privacy, views, etc.
Yes, and many of those are listed on our Shoreline Partnership website. Another excellent resource is Wild Type Native Plant Nursery. Their lists are fantastic. Stantec also has a native plant nursery. And there's a large native nursery in Indiana with great online information. Another great resource is Homegrown National Park from Doug Tallamy's organization. Tallamy is an entomologist who advocates for restoring native plants. He's written several books on the importance of native species. Their website has excellent resources. And as Julia answers questions, I'm dropping the links into the chat.
The next question was about the link to the geese relocation petition. It's on our Facebook pages, Coldwater Lake Association and Coldwater Sandbar. If you're not on Facebook, I'll get the link onto the Coldwater website tonight. Next question is, what are recommendations and allowed practices for dealing with geese? In Michigan, we're encouraged to use non-lethal methods first. Things like visual deterrence, sound deterrence, and dog harassment. But our residents already tried those and they haven't reduced the goose population. Because of that, the next step allowed by the state is applying for a permit to perform nest and egg destruction. This is strictly regulated, requires trained volunteers, and is considered a last resort tool when other measures fail. The goal isn't to eliminate geese entirely, but to control overpopulation humanely and reduce the ongoing problems on our lake. Long-term solutions, as we mentioned, are habitat changes with shoreline buffers.
There was also a question about septic systems. First, know the age of your system. If you don't know the age or even where it is, that's a problem. You also need to know the size, because many systems are not sized for the number of people using them. If your system is older, it probably doesn't meet current standards. Many people have never pumped their septic system. On a lake, regular pumping is very important. Watershed management often includes septic system inventories. That involves identifying system ages, checking health department records, and mapping high-risk systems. If the health department has no records, the system is likely very old. Older systems pose greater risk. There was one more question about defraying sewer system costs. There are funding sources, state revolving funds, rural development funds, and others that can offset infrastructure costs. Some are loans, some are reduced cost programs, and some may include grants. Communities have used these resources before. It just takes some exploration to find the right fit.
Yes, and like I mentioned, our watershed subcommittee, there are 3 of us, has been working on the watershed plan and partnering with folks from the Marble chain. The lead person organizing the sewer discussions on that chain is Craig Fichtelberg, the supervisor of Algon Sea Township. He'll likely be sharing information, and he has all the links to those resources as well. I don't see any new questions. Thank you again, Eric and Julia. We can wrap up. If anyone has questions after the meeting, feel free to reach out through the Coldwater Lake Association website. There's a contact button. Send us a message and we'll respond. Also, please take a few minutes to complete our survey. Your feedback is essential as we plan future webinars. You can access the survey using the QR code or by visiting the link on our website under this webinar summary. Thank you.
You're most welcome.
I appreciate it. Let's wrap up. Good night, everyone.
Thanks for having us. Take care, everyone.